Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please now welcome Jeremy Cornfeldt, president of iProspect, and Jackie Ramsey, director of Advertising Age.
Good morning.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me, Jeremy.
Welcome.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ad Age's Digital Conference 2016. I just wanted to set the stage a bit here. This is our 10th anniversary year. We're very excited to be back at Pier 36. And when we first started this conference, we were having a conversation around digital versus traditional advertising. Well, the space has evolved and changed, and digital is everywhere. It is a part of everything that we do and everything that we talk about. So a couple of months ago at Ad Age, we wanted to tell a story in a more meaningful way and illustrate that path to purchase and how data has informed and changed a consumer's journey. Well, when we decided to do that, we knew there was a perfect partner to go to, and that partner was iProspect. So I am thrilled, and thank you for being here, Jeremy.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Jeremy is the president of iProspect. There he leads the strategy, product offerings, and client services teams. And I think, Jeremy, a good place for us to start is iProspect is the world's leading performance marketing agency. What does that mean? How do you define that?
Well, our history is in search. So when you think about performance, what it used to mean and what it still does mean today is taking a budget, using that budget effectively and driving towards a sale. But I think as digital has taken hold, as the entire space has evolved, what we're really seeing and what we talk about quite a bit internally is that the point of engagement and the point of transaction are coming closer and closer together. So no longer do you use one screen to just build brand and another screen to just transact. Those things are melding together. So when we think about performance, yes, it's ultimately about a sale, but it's also about, and to your point around this linear or non-linear journey, it's about all of the different touch points along the way, and how are we connecting those dots together and understanding the influence that all the different touch points have on our ultimate goal of driving that sale. And then the other piece of that too is, where is the sale actually happening? You know, there's a lot of talk in the space about omnichannel, and it's really important, and we're seeing a lot of our clients that used to be traditionally responsible for e-com now also wanting to understand the influence that online is happening on offline sales, the influence that things that happening in the store might happen online. So where is that transaction actually taking place, and how are we attributing and crediting activity that might be happening in the digital space to activity that might be happening outside of that as well. And so we look at performance as a series of actions that we're looking to do that ultimately drive business outcomes.
Okay. And Jeremy, when you begin conversations with a client, how do you start to engage with a client on a performance marketing initiative? Where does it begin?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting question, because I think traditionally, what performance agencies would do with a client is you'd say, what's the budget? What's the goal? What's the ROI? Let me look at what you've done in the past. Let me make some tweaks. And now I'm going to start driving performance ultimately, and I'm going to meet your ROI goal. I think in the world today, and especially when you look at what's going on in the digital economy, as we call it now, you have to take a much broader look. How is the client's business doing? How has it been performing historically? Where do they want to go in the future? Where is it possible for them to go in the future? What are those barriers that are in the way? What does their competitive set look like? So what we're seeing with a lot of clients right now is there is a traditional competitive set for sure, but there's also what we'll call the digital economy competitor set. Non-legacy businesses that are coming in and being completely disruptive. And then how do we look and attack those different businesses as well as our core set of competitors, and what does it mean to the space that we're actually working in? This one client, I wish I could say his name, but he won't let me, but he said this quote that I absolutely love, and he's in a legacy big box retail business. And he's got his traditional set of competitors. But there's also digital upstarts that are coming in with different types of models, subscription models, things where they can actually pay more for customer acquisition than he's ever been used to. And he's looking at me and we're talking about his search campaign. I'm not showing up for these keywords and this keyword and that keyword. And he goes, and I know my team is telling you that we need to manage to an ROI and that the ROI is just not effective for that immediate sale. He goes, but if we keep focusing on that, if that's all we focus on, we are going to ROI ourselves right out of business. And I think when we start looking at launching a performance campaign now, it's looking at what are our sort of tried and true metrics. How do we need to expand outside of that? What does the competitive set look like? Both our core competitors and new competitors. And then where we start to focus in on is around the consumer.
I want to ask about something you said that's
Sure.
very interesting. So when you were speaking of a client who you mentioned legacy brand
Yes.
in the space, traditional competitive set,
Yep.
and now has to look differently
Yep.
through this evolution of the digital economy at perhaps more and surprising competitors. So I have to ask, because everything is available to consumers whenever they want it, wherever they want it, is brand loyalty still important, as important to the consumer, and how do you build that along the path to purchase?
I think that brand loyalty, there's a few things with it. One, I feel like it's evolved. So I think as digital took hold and there was more transparency and people could actually get a lot more information and understand more about the brands, people started to take a little bit of a step back and want to understand, can they trust or can they not trust different brands? But brands that have been really successful have been able to build that trust, and they've been able to build that trust through a variety of different things, but ultimately it really comes down to experiences. What kind of experience are they creating during the sales process, post the sales process, to really create that loyalty? A lot of talk in the space has always been, and rightly so, about attribution. I want to understand my converting media, but I also want to understand the media that is influencing a sale, but maybe not necessarily driving a conversion. So connecting all of those dots and understanding that is really important. But I think what marketers often miss in that whole conversation and as they're connecting the dots to the path to purchase is looking at what is the message that you're actually saying within your influencing media. And more often than not, the messages are very much the same across the entire path. So you might have a display ad that has the exact same message as a branded search term in that paid search ad. This is the opportunity when we can actually start to create new and different experiences. If I know something is more of an influencing tactic and something else is going to be more of a converting tactic, let me change that message so I can start to create a new and different experience and build trust. Because what we do know from consumers and from our vast consumer insights is that I start to trust brands when I have a positive experience, and other consumers trust people that are like them. So if I see that you're like me, and you've had a positive experience, and you share that with me, that's immediately going to increase my trust level with whatever brand I'm going to engage with.
And that speaks to the conversation that's happening a lot in our industry right now about how marketers need to think of consumers and treat consumers as humans, as real people. At iProspect, you talk a lot about that, and you have figured out how to do that better than anyone. How do you do that? How do you do it differently?
So I think there's a lot of things that we look at when we're getting ready to launch any kind of performance initiative. So there's the obvious things that the digital space has always allowed us to track, which are, consumers' different behaviors. So creating a demographic, a psychographic profile, understanding content that they consume, where they go, time of day, different screens, etc. There's a lot of first-party information you can glean from a client's CRM database and activity that's actually happening on their site. But we also have some proprietary information that really help us take all of that behavioral data, that demographic and that psychographic data, and match it up with motivations and attitudes. And I think that those things actually become really crucial to sort of completing the entire piece of the puzzle. Because if you understand what people are doing, but also why they're doing it, that really starts to help shape how you want to create those experiences and how you actually want to start to engage with different consumers. We have a client that's in the luxury space. And one of the things that they wanted to do was promote an engagement ring product. Now, they're a high-end brand, very well known, clearly an object of desire, but they wanted to move beyond just being an object and actually start to build a longer-term relationship. And the engagement ring product was not only a great time to do it with this consumer, because they're getting engaged and there was a lot of opportunity for them to have interaction with them, but this is the beginning of a lifetime relationship. That's the way that they looked at it. And so we did our research, we looked at all of the different things, and a lot of the things that we found were things that people would for sure think about when it's a high-end expensive product. They're of engagement, marriage age, so they're younger, they can afford this product, so they're affluent, jobs in finance or in this space, in major metropolitan areas, things that we would know and understand. But one of the motivations, one of the attitudes that we found out about this consumer is that they're really intense. And when we started to dig deeper into this intensity and understand more about what it meant, it's probably best to crystallize it in an example, but they don't have this type of target doesn't have a backyard barbecue. They don't cook hamburgers and hot dogs for their friends. When they have people over for a meal, it's like eating at a 5-course restaurant. The house is dressed up, table's dressed up, they're dressed up, and the food is perfect, bar none. To get this and to deliver on this kind of an experience for themselves, they're voracious consumers of content. They go to trusted resources where they want to research everything to the nth degree, so that they can really put together an experience that all of their guests will understand. And that is true through every aspect of their life. And that's what this intensity really helped us understand, this motivation helped us understand about these different consumers. So ultimately, when we went to put a program together, because we have this big brand, they're well known in the space, what they needed content. So we were going to a lot of the different types of publications where we would always run, but we were changing the nature of our relationship. So it wasn't just about advertising, it was about creating content, creating an experience, and almost acting like a concierge for this target audience as they selected the ring, as they went through the planning process, as they looked at a wedding band, and then you're creating a relationship where you are a trusted advisor that's actually going to be part of this consumer's life as they reach other major milestones, anniversary dates, birth of a child, all of those different things where this brand can now play a role as a trusted advisor and maybe as something that you actually then go ahead and purchase. And I think those are the things that we try to look at as we understand consumers and understand where they're going, what they're doing, when they're doing it, but most importantly, why. And that creates positive experiences.
Sure. That sounds like a very successful interaction, engagement that you worked on with the client. Can you help us learn from perhaps a less successful one? Or can you give us, can you lift the curtain and
Jackie,
tell us, wow, these are pitfalls. This is something we see a lot that we've learned to avoid.
Case studies are always supposed to be good stories. Sure, I think one of the things that we've learned over the course of years of doing this is that we don't want to just box ourselves into delivering against one specific metric. So if you go back to that ROI comment that I made at the beginning, we've had situations with clients where we are delivering on the ROI, but we're missing out on what the bigger opportunity is for the client by not taking a broader look at what's happening in the space, what's going on with the competitors, understanding more about the consumers and how they're evolving as different platforms and different screens are evolving. And I think we always have to be pushing forward and taking in every single touch point as another piece of data that feeds a learning system so that we get smarter not only with every dollar that we spend, but we make every campaign that much better moving forward. So I'd say my broader advice is just about making sure that you're constantly looking beyond what your day-to-day metrics are and what you're supposed to be delivering from an ROI perspective.
And Jeremy, you've had vast experience in this space. You've held many senior positions. Your work at iProspect, you've worked with incredible partners, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Apple. Any trends that you're seeing? What do you think the next 6, 12, 18 months will uncover in this space?
So there's probably two that we're really honing in on right now. I think the bigger one is around machine learning. So if you look at what's going on in the space and machine learning and what just happened recently with the game where the computer actually beat the best player in the world, machines are getting smarter in terms of how they ingest and take in information and then start to reapply that. Like even think about the Google driverless cars. What's really fascinating about these cars is that if anybody's seen the pictures of them, there's a big eye that sits on the top of the roof of the car. And what it's doing is it's recording data everywhere that it drives. So if it sees a pothole, it records it. And not only does it record it and try and avoid the pothole, but it sends that information back to a central database so that the next driverless car knows that on East Main Street there's a pothole half a mile down the road. Sure. And so that it avoids it. So this constant ingestion of data and then using this information so that we can reapply it in new situations or in the same situations, I think is going to be really game-changing for us as marketers and in the space that we're in. Because the smarter that machines get, the more that they start to learn and know about you and understand not just what you're doing and where you're doing it, but like I said, about the why, I think that starts to have a profound effect on what's actually going to happen in the space. The other trend I think that's going to be really interesting for us to look at as marketers is how people continue to interact with their different devices. So everybody's seen the Amazon ads with Alexa. We know that voice search is really starting to take off. The idea of not even typing anymore and just saying what you want and starting to get real-time responses back, I think is also going to be very interesting in terms of how people's behavior change, in terms of the devices and the way that they interact with them. And I think it's also going to have an impact on marketers in terms of how we ensure that our information rises to the top when people are actually having these different conversations with their devices. I think those are some trends that we're really paying close attention to.
Okay. I'm going to be sure to write those down when I go backstage.
Okay.
I want to give the audience a few minutes. Does anyone have any questions for Jeremy? He will also be sticking around for a short time afterwards, so I encourage you to, if you're bashful and don't want to raise your hand now, please find time. Oh, do we have a question? Is that a... No, you were just saying hi. Hi. Anyone else? Well, I'll continue then. So we're very excited about this program, and we thank you. You've been a trusted, longtime partner and a really exciting one for us in this path to purchase consumer data, which will, I should let everyone know, it will be launching in the upcoming days, and all of you will hear about that from Ad Age and iProspect. But was there anything, what was the one reason or what was most exciting for you when we began talking about this project with your team? Because we felt you were the perfect partner, but I'd like to hear from your side why that has worked so well for you.
Well, I think some of the conversations that we've even had about the linear path or the non-linear path and how the consumer is getting from the entry point to the sales point and what's happening in between has been really interesting, and what are all the touch points along the way, and what's the data that we're collecting. You know, there's a lot of talk in the space right now about, is it a linear journey, is it a non-linear journey? And I think that we get a little bit, as an industry, too hung up on that nomenclature, and I think for me, there is a start point and there is an end point. And what's different is there could be very few or there could be dozens of touch points in between that start point and that end point. And I think where we're trying to go as an agency, and I think where we're all trying to go in an industry, is mapping out what are those different touch points. So what are they? Why are they happening? And how do we want to engage with consumers along the way? And then once we get to that end point, which is ultimately, a sale, how does the relationship then continue? from a longer term
Right.
perspective. From a
And
lifetime
building
value
that brand loyalty along the path.
along the path
And after
then
the path.
after the path. And I think that's really the key thing. How do you continue to build that loyalty? Because like I said, consumers trust other consumers. So if I'm creating a positive experience throughout the whole thing and then afterwards, and I share that information with you and you trust me, that starts to build positivity for the brands in the long term.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
You are doing some incredible work at iProspect,
Great.
and we are thrilled to be partnering with you.
thanks so much.
Thank you, Jeremy Cornfeldt, for joining us this morning.